Hey, welcome back to Release Radar. I'm Chris Biscardi, and today we're checking out if you can use the Notion Beta API for your blog. Let's start at the beginning, because beginning to understand what a block editor is will be useful when we start talking about the Notion API. When it comes to authoring content, most developers are intimately familiar with a linear, string-based editing environment, like VS Code, Emacs, and others. This approach is also carried over into note-taking apps and document-based apps that have appeared over the last decade. Common examples of these are the Mac Notes app, Bear Notes, and more. That places them into the left-hand side of this graphic. Moving into the block editors in the middle, we can already see a difference in the underlying structure. Each top-level element is a block, and top-level elements can be simple, like a heading, or complex, like a table. Often block editors over the last year or two have added the ability to reference a specific block by ID. So while editors in the first category are fairly simple to implement in a single player mode because they're just strings in a database, block editors up the level of complexity because they can be stored as groups of strings with additional metadata. We can go further than this middle representation into more of a tree representation on the right. This enables the nesting of blocks inside of each other, and this results in pages, elements, and more all being blocks. Notion is one of the most notable block editors at the moment. Others exist, such as Gutenberg and WordPress, and many devs have started their own projects working on their own block editors, resulting in many different editors in the open source ecosystem at various stages of completeness with different goals. Full disclosure here, I also work on my own block editor project called Sector that I use to write everything that's on my website. Notion also has the additional feature of collaboration, which adds even more complexity to the implementation. Often products in the past have used operational transforms to power multiplayer experiences, and this works, but historically has been complicated to implement. A newer approach using data structures called CRDTs has also been coming into the forefront. If you want to play with this kind of technology yourself, better understand the constraints, I encourage you to take a look at the data structure projects like YJS and AutoMerge, and editor projects like Slate.js. Which brings us back to the Notion API. At this point, I've explained some of the complexities inherent in exposing a block editor as an API, which is what I believe the reason to be for the Notion API not being fully fleshed out yet. It's just a hard problem. The Notion API deals with pages, blocks, and databases. Databases are collections of pages, and pages are collections of blocks. The API currently allows creating a page and appending blocks to a page, but not updating any block content. This means that once a block is added to a page, it's just there, until you go into the UI and do something about it. This makes the Write API most useful for injecting blocks into some sort of to-do type page, so that you can go back in later into the UI and investigate or work on what's needed. To start off with the API, you need to create an integration and then give the integration access to the database you want it to access. By default, integrations can't access anything. Once given access, we can use the secret associated with our integration and the ID of the database we want to update to insert new items. In this case, we've inserted an item called Yurts in Big Sur, California into this database. And it shows up in real time, you'll notice, which is a really nice touch. Much of the rest of the API, including writing renderers for this content, feels a little bit rough, so seeing the real-time updates here is really nice. Now, when we inserted, we used a post to the pages endpoint with our bearer token and a Notion version of 2021 5.13, which is the API version we're using. The body of the request specified the database ID to insert into and the properties to insert into that database. If these properties weren't accurate, we would receive an error back. We can also search using the V1 search endpoint. I've piped this through the JQ so that we can get a little bit of a better look. And you can see that if we don't search for anything, we just get a list back of everything we have access to. We can see some database items, the database itself, some pages, page properties, and more. Note that these pages don't come back with their content. They only come back with the page properties. To get the page content, we have to make another request. Using a GET request, we can go to the blocks block ID/children endpoint to fetch all the blocks for a block ID. Again, I've piped this into JQ so that we can get a better look at the output. And again, we get a list back. The results are a list of blocks. And if I go to my Getting Started page, you can see a number of to-dos here, such as create an account. And on the right-hand side, we see a block that is a to-do that has a text with the content of create an account. If we scroll down to more interesting content in the page, like this subpage right here called testing, we can see that the object is a block with a child page title of testing. If we wanted the content of this page, we would have to go fetch it again. Also notice that we have a database here with the table name of table is unsupported, which means that we're not going to get the content back. To use this on your blog, you would first have to search for everything you have access to, which means setting up your Notion workspace in a very specific way and giving access to the integration for only the things that you want to publish. That said, you could also control publishing via page properties, but it would require diving deep into the JSON to find those properties and detect them. The roughest part of rendering is that nobody's built a solid Notion rendering library yet, so you're going to have to do that work yourself, whether you're rendering with Vue or Next or React or something else. All in all, I think the Write API is most suited towards things like injecting new information so that a human can go and curate it later. And the Read API seems like it'll get more support for more block types over time. So I'm looking forward to seeing this API come out of beta with a little bit more polish around it. It still seems pretty usable, and people have waited a pretty long time for this Notion API. So I have confidence that it'll show up on many sites soon.